to make a collage using things like notebook paper. So what I did for mine was I just took a picture of like some crumpled up notebook paper and I imported it as a photo in my Procreate document, and I'm going to use it to cut out shapes. So use your select tool, draw your shape, and then use 3 fingers to swipe down to choose cut and paste, and then you have your shape. I like to duplicate my shape and then I make a layer in between, which I fill with a dark color, and then I use a clipping mask to make the shape that's underneath of my main object completely black or dark gray. And then you go up to the select tool and you choose Gaussian blur, and you can swipe out towards the right and make your blur as little or as much as you want. And then I like to kind of nudge it down a little bit. And I feel like that gives it like a realistic looking shadow. So I'm going to make another one. So let's pull up our notebook paper again. I'm going to duplicate it because I want to keep my original. And then I'm just going to draw another shape. So I'll grab my select tool again. I keep it on freehand, and then I'm just going to draw another cloud. I swipe down with 3 fingers to do the copy and paste or cut and paste, and then I have my shape. I'm going to put that layer in between the 2 objects, fill it with black, clip it down, and then merge it down. And then I use my Gaussian blur to add my shadow. You can take the opacity down a little bit to make it just how you like. And then I like to put mine in groups just to keep organized. Okay, so far we have 2 clouds. So I'm just going to scoot this one down so I can see the 2 pieces of paper here. And you can see how they look like little cutout pieces of notebook paper with the shadow behind them. So I think I'll make one more. So I'm going to grab my original layer again, duplicate it, and cut out another cloud shape from this notebook paper. And then hit the arrow tool, swipe down with 3 fingers, choose cut and paste. Do the same process with the shadow, and then I'll have my 3rd cloud. So now we have these 3 clouds to work with, and I'm going to create some scotch tape to make it look like they're taped down to the paper. So I make a new layer, and then I'm going to grab my select tool, choose rectangle, draw a rectangle, and then fill it with a light gray color. So then I'm just going to cut out like a jaggedy edge to make it look like real tape that's been ripped off of a spool, and then I'll make the drop shadow from that shape by duplicating, making that layer in between, filling with a darker gray, and then clipping it down to the layer that's underneath and merging it down if it looks good. And then you use your Gaussian blur tool again to make your drop shadow and adjust it as needed. In this case, it looks like it's not quite dark enough, so I'm gonna just adjust it with the hue, saturation, and brightness tool and just make it a tad darker so it looks more like a drop shadow and it's more obvious. So I'm gonna flatten down this group of layers. That way I can reduce the opacity to make it look more like a real piece of tape. You can see when you drag it over top of your notebook paper, you can see through it, which is what you want it to look like if it was a real piece of scotch tape. After that, you can duplicate it as you need it and just use it to stick down the papers all over wherever you want your tape to show up. So I'm just going to make a few copies and use it to make it look like I've taped these clouds down to my background. Next, I thought it would be fun to make one of them look like it was stapled down. So I made a new layer, and I'm going to draw my staple in that layer with a dark gray color. I just used the monoline brush that comes with the Procreate app in the calligraphy folder and just draw a straight line. If you hold your pen down, it'll make a perfectly straight line. And once you think it looks good, you can make a new layer underneath. I made the holes using a darker color, so black, and then it's the same brush, just a little bit bigger of a brush tip, and then you just draw 2 dots right underneath of your straight line to make it look like it's the staple being punched through the paper. And then the last thing I wanted to do to make it look realistic is to add just like a little shine. So I made another layer on the very top, and I'm going to use a lighter color, and I set the layer to vivid light, but you could just do it with the normal, just have the layer in the normal mode and just use a lighter color. And I just made a skinnier line. I just took the brush tip down a little bit. It's the same monoline brush, and then you just draw a straight line, and then it looks like a little shine for your staple. You can add a little shadow underneath of the middle, just to make it look like it's raised a little bit. In this one, I just took the actual staple and put a little bit of a Gaussian blur on it, and that worked fine, so I didn't have to duplicate layers or anything. And then it makes it look like it's raised off the paper a little bit. And then I just put this all into its own folder and name the group my staple. That way I can keep track of what my layers are. Once I have my folder, I can duplicate it, and then I can just use that to keep making as many staples as I want. So I just duplicate the staple, and then I drag it down using the arrow tool to make it look like all these different little pieces of paper are stapled down. So the last thing I wanted to do was to doodle on top of the notebook paper to make it look like it was really drawn on with pencil. So I'm going to use the pencil in the sketching folder that comes with the Procreate app. Just choose whichever pencil you wish, whichever one you prefer. And then I use a dark gray color, and then I can make it look like it's like graphite on the paper, and then I draw my little faces on my clouds. I'm gonna set it to multiply so that some of the lines and the texture of the notebook paper show through, and then I think it looks more realistic that way. But you can just play around with the different blending modes and see which you prefer. So I just make a new layer on top of each little cloud folder to add my little faces, just so I can keep track of which faces go with which clouds. You could put it inside the folder, but I thought I might duplicate the clouds again. I didn't want to use the same faces over and over again. So I thought I would just put it on top of each cloud folders to keep track, and then just draw little fun faces or whatever all over each piece of paper, and you can just make it really fun and just customize it the way that you would normally doodle, like in your notebook or whatever. On this one, I changed my mind about how I wanted the eyes to look, but I thought it would be fun to erase it so that still some of the old pencil shows through, just like you would in real life, since I drew it on there so dark. So I used my eraser in the same brush that my pencil was in and took the opacity down a little bit so it wouldn't completely erase everything underneath, and then it still shows through a little bit. And I thought that made it look like more realistic and what would actually happen if you drew something on your paper really dark and then you changed your mind. So I thought that was kind of like a fun way to add a little extra texture and a little bit of extra like realism to this collage. The last thing I wanted to do was make it look like these were taped down in like a real notebook or on graph paper or something. So I took my original layer and I stretched it out to fit my canvas, and then I'm gonna reduce the opacity a little bit just to make it less intense, and then I'll duplicate it and rotate it so that it makes a cross-hatching pattern, kind of like graph paper. And I thought that might be a cute background for this kind of design. And you can kind of play around with that on your own to make your own background layers. You could take another picture of a different type of paper, like instruction paper or craft paper or something, but to be honest, I was kind of lazy and I wanted to use the same piece of paper over and over again, so I just thought I would make it more like a graph paper for my background using what I already had. And the last thing I wanted to do was to add a little title, like I was in some sort of a class, like how you would title in your notebook, like at the top of the page or whatever. And I thought it might be appropriate to just call it Doodle 101. So I took my pencil and put that at the top so it looked like it was just something out of my notebook, and just added a little bit of something fun to finish it off. I hope this project was fun for you, and I would love to see what you came up with for your Doodle 101. So share and tag me so I can check it out, and I can't wait to see what you created. If you liked this video, then give me a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more, then don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.